With me right now is Julian Epstein, served as chief counsel to the House Judiciary Committee and staff director to the House Oversight Committee for Democrats. And I have to tell you, the reason why I'm not reporting about the Donald Trump trial downtown is because they're an off day today. I think Donald Trump is golfing at his Westchester club. Julian Epstein, welcome back.
Brian, thanks for having me again. I really appreciate it.
All right, first off, Julian, just something a little out of your ballpark, perhaps. $95 billion aid, you support it?
Yeah, I second everything you just said. I think the Ukrainian aid is important. I think the aid for Israel is important. I think the aid in the Indo-Pacific is critical. I think we have seen enough examples of UN, whether it's UNRWA or some of the other agencies, being used in ways that are supportive of terrorist groups there. And I don't think there's been enough investigation, enough vetting. The fact that you had a number of UNRWA employees who were openly supporting Hamas after the October 7th massacre tells me that there are just huge cultural issues that have not been properly investigated and that need investigation before we start sending aid.
But I'll give you, I think it's actually worse,
so
Julian.
I agree with everything you said.
Some of them participated with Hamas in the massacre. And even though that doesn't count for the 1,100 in the organization, it does count for a few dozen, and we don't know how deep it gets. I want you to hear what's going on in Colombia. Right now, the sit-in continues. They say they're not leaving for those things I said up top about divestiture and everything like that. Here's a little of how it sounded, cut one.
Free, free, free Palestine!
Free, free, free Palestine!
Disclose! Divest!
We will not stop, we will not rest! Disclose! Divest! We will not stop, we will not rest!
All right, so let's disclose. There are about 100 U.S. colleges that have reported gifts or contracts with Israel totaling $375 million minimum. The data tells little about where the money is going. MIT in particular, $11 million from the Defense Ministry over the past decade. They also get something in return, like great research with great students. When you hear that, Julian, what are you thinking? Can you believe this is happening in America? And can you believe it's happening in dozens of campuses, not just in Columbia, not just at NYU?
No, I can't believe this on just so many levels. And, you know, if these protests were going on in the state of Florida, Ron DeSantis would shut this down in a heartbeat. And the fact that this is happening in Democratic areas like California and New York, and the governor doesn't shut it down, the mayor doesn't shut it down, and the president of the United States, who has authority under the civil rights laws, the federal civil rights laws, Title VI, sort of a number of different laws. The fact that the federal government hasn't done anything, as Dwight Eisenhower did when black students were attempted to be blocked from entering public schools in the South in the late 50s. The fact that no one is doing anything about this is just outrageous. And what it will do is it will encourage more of it. You know, this is not speech. This is illegal harassment, and it's violence. It's shutting down the education system. This is not a liberation movement that the Students for Justice in Palestine are supporting. The Palestinians have rejected a two-state solution on at least 5 different occasions. The Palestinian leadership, through Hamas and through the Palestinian Authority, pledges the genocide of Jews and others that are different in any way from them, either religious minorities or ethnic minorities. You know, the civilian casualty ratio in Gaza right now is lower than the civilian casualty ratio was with almost any other conflict that the U.S. has prosecuted, particularly in urban areas, whether it's Mosul, whether it's Afghanistan, Japan. Several million Japanese were killed after 2,000 soldiers were U.S. soldiers were killed in Pearl Harbor. In Sudan, there's been 2 million Arabs and Muslims that have been killed. In Syria, there were close to 1 million, about 700,000. We were responsible maybe for 500,000 in Afghanistan and Iraq, but there were never any protests then. It's only when Jews are attacked by genocidal maniacs are they told that they do not have the right to defend themselves? Are they told that they do not have the right to go after what is effectively a Nazi fascist organization that preaches genocide of anyone that's different from them.
I mean,
and the fact that the Biden administration and the left just tolerates this is only encouraging them. They have more than enough authority to shut them down, to tell them if they want to protest, there's a corner and or there is a designated area on the university campus they can do it on, but to allow them to do this kind of thing is just encouraging
make them be heroes. Right.
Julian,
I want to tap. I 100% agree. I just want to get you, before we run out of time, on the Trump trial. So we're about 2 days into the testimony. David Pecker out there talking about, and they're trying to say a conspiracy to commit election interference. And they're saying Michael Cohen, Donald Trump, and David Pecker combined to do that. They talk about negative things written about that were made up on Marco Rubio, on Ted Cruz, on Ben Carson. And they also talk about killing some negative stories in the president's background. Some not true, some may be true. The definitely one with the doorman and a love child, not true, but they didn't want anything coming out, so they just paid it off. Your reaction to what we learned so far?
This is an outrageous case. It's an embarrassment to the legal system that this case is being brought. The theory that we heard on Monday from the prosecution that this is about election interference because the Trump campaign was trying to suppress bad stories. Suppressing bad stories is not election interference. Everyone does it. Non-disclosure agreements are perfectly legal. If suppressing bad news were election interference, then what would one say about the Biden campaign in 2020 that actively used all of its resources to suppress the Hunter Biden laptop case? That had much more serious implications in terms of the election than the alleged affair with Donald Trump in 2016. Everything falls apart, Brian. The idea that this was election interference. The election occurred in November of 2016. The conduct in question here, namely the record keeping and the failure to disclose this, if there was any obligation as a campaign contribution, all occurred in 2017. So
after he was elected,
this is after he's elected. So this is a phony, terrible theory that should be an embarrassment to anybody that's making it. I just can't believe that the prosecution made this with a straight face. But what they're also trying to do, Brian, is they are trying to bootstrap a federal crime, namely the non-reporting of hush money as a federal campaign expenditure. They're trying to bootstrap that to a state misdemeanor. Well, as a number of FEC chairs have said and officials have officials have said in the past, hush money is not a campaign expenditure that requires reporting. And if the officials in charge of enforcing the law at the Federal Election Commission say that hush money is not a reportable expenditure, then how could anyone say that Donald Trump had the intent, which is the requirement under the law, to violate the law? It just doesn't make any sense. So this is, there is no precedent for this kind of legal theory. There's none. You can't find. I challenge anyone to find a precedent. There is none. Civil libertarians on the left have been calling for decades for the equal application of the law. They're completely silent on this. They should be ashamed of themselves. This case would never be brought. This legal theory is complete bunk. This case would never be brought if it was anyone other than Donald Trump. And this is Joseph Stalin. Show me the man, I'll show you the crime. Remember, just for your viewers' benefit, I'm not somebody who voted for Donald Trump. I voted for Joe Biden, and I find this case outrageous. I also find it outrageous because this conduct now occurred 8 years ago. They have waited 8 years on the eve of the election to bring a phony, legally defective case against the former president on the eve of the election. It's just amazing to me that the left is doing this with a straight face. And I say to them, and I'll conclude on this thought, I say to them that if Donald Trump is elected, watch out, because I can think of a lot more credible theories where a Trump Justice Department could bring a criminal prosecution on Joseph Biden for the documents case, a case in which he held classified documents in his garage for years, or on Hunter Biden for either the foreign agent registration violations or for tax violations, and they could find creative ways of tolling the statutes of limitations. And if the left thinks that the law can be stretched in this way that they're using against Donald Trump for their political opponents, then watch out, because there are easier theories, less pretzel-like theories that the political right and the Republicans can use against the Bidens and against a whole lot of others. And this is where the system begins to completely break down. And this is the fault of the lawfare left.
I know. I would hate to see I would hate to see Trump win and they go after him because it hurts the country. But I understand the sentiment. I just saw this guest essay in the New York Times today, Julian Epstein, and I thought the title said it all. I thought the Bragg case against Trump was a legal embarrassment. Now I think it's a historic mistake. This is from Jed Handelsman Sugarman. He is a law professor at Boston University. And when he came out and said the case was a joke, everyone jumped on him. So he took a step back, watched it for the last 6 days, and then wrote this column in the New York Times. So I think he echoes what you thought. You know, you're not going to vote for Trump. It's not the point. It's not the point. You're leaving him in this case to go over things in his background that make people distracted to think what is a crime and what is a bad decision personally and what is practical. And the thing that I bring up all the time, let's say you and I are in business. I go to run for office. You don't like the way our business ended. You didn't like the way I acted in business. I don't like the way you acted. So you start giving interviews to people saying, yeah, don't vote for Brian Kilmeade. He really screwed me in business. He didn't work hard, didn't show up on time. I go, Julian, can't have you talking like this. What is it going to take for you to calm down? And you give me a price, and I pay it. Did I commit a crime?
Right. No, you didn't, and it's well recognized in the law, I think, that kind of thing is not a campaign expenditure, which needs to be reported on the federal reporting requirements, which is the theory essentially that Bragg is using here. And he and I both wrote the author you cited, and I both wrote pieces for. He wrote for the New York Times. I wrote for the Wall Street Journal a year ago in April.
I know,
saying that this case was bunk, and we were both attacked for it. And I think everything we said then is becoming true now. The other point that we haven't touched on, Brian, is both Alvin Bragg and Letitia James campaigned on going after Donald Trump. And I think the Letitia James case was also a travesty because in that alleged fraud case, there were no victims and there were no damages and nobody was complaining. And the fact that they're going to try to hold Trump up on a $500 million fine, criminal fine on that is just, it's completely unprecedented. Again, it wouldn't be happening to anybody other than Donald Trump. And again, I don't say I'm not a Donald Trump supporter, so I say this as somebody who's just outraged by the abuse of the law. The fact that you have prosecutors out there campaigning on going after political figures like Trump is a complete conflict of interest, and is something that it's inexplicable to me as to why the New York bar doesn't take up. I mean, this kind of conflict of interest in any other context would be something that would be worthy of disciplinary proceedings. But the fact that the New York bar turns a blind eye to the conflicts, I think, that were manifest with both Letitia James and Alvin Bragg is very, very troubling to me as well. So there is a lot wrong with this stuff. And the fact that the left is out there because it's good for cable ratings, it's good for selling copy, it's good for keeping people on TV, the lawfare left industry benefits from it. The fact that they're so opportunistically and self-promotingly.
Got it, Julian. I got to end it there.
Going along with this thing is outrageous.
Julian Epstein, thanks so much. Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Kilmeade. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to click to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page. This is the only way that I know for sure that you're not going to miss any great commentary, any great news bites, any great interviews coming your way on Fox. You can get it all here on YouTube. So subscribe right now.